don't wanna buy, don't wanna pay. Got no money, but that's okay. Can't get to heaven in that way. I'm happy as I am. St. Pete said, Joe, won't you come on in? Won't you come on in? Said St. Pete said, Joe, won't you come on in? And all the angels sang, sing it with them. Don't wanna buy, don't wanna pay. Got no money, but that's okay. Can't get to heaven in that way. I'm happy as I am. One more time. Don't wanna buy, don't wanna pay. Can't get to heaven, that's okay. Can't get to heaven in that way. Welcome home, old Joe. Oh, thank you for being our angel choir. Weren't they great?
You guys are fantastic. Thank you so much.
You on the road with us.
I'm happy as I am. Happy clam. So there was this guy sitting in a bar looking morbidly at his drink, and in comes this angry-looking, trouble-looking for biker-looking guy. And he walks over and he takes this guy's drink from right out in front of him and he chugs it, drinks it all down and slams it back down and says, "So what are you going to do about that?" And the guy said, "Well, this is the worst day of my life. I got up this morning and I went to work and I got to work late and my boss fired me. I went out to the parking lot, my car had been stolen, I don't have insurance so I can't replace it. Took a cab home, left my wallet in the cab and went inside the house and my wife was having an affair with another guy and on my way out my dog bit me. So I came here to this bar and decided to end it all. And I took a pill and I put it in my drink and as I'm sitting here watching it dissolve, you come in and drink the whole thing. But enough about me. How you doing?" Just like a child, sometimes we're willing to share our discomfort, aren't we? Okay, so this month, already free. When you realize what freedom really is, I mean what it really is, and that you already are free, even if you don't think you are, experiencing freedom can come easily, naturally. So that's what we're doing this whole month, and today in specific, since freedom is our natural state, our God state, along with all the other qualities of God, including abundance and responsibility and intelligence, power and joy and beauty and perfection. All of that's included in us. And sometimes we don't feel that power. Sometimes we don't feel that intelligence. Sometimes we don't feel the joy. We don't feel the peace. We don't feel the harmony. We don't feel that organically natural state of ease. What do we do about that? Let's talk first of all about the two kinds of freedom. There's outer freedom and inner freedom. Back in the day, and it's still true today, one of my greatest imaginings or romantic notions about freedom was the ability to fly. I mean, I can remember having flying dreams as a kid, and I just loved that experience. So in my late 20s, I decided to take flying lessons. And I got my private rating, and I got my instrument rating, got my commercial rating, and because my vision was not good enough to become an air transport pilot, I stopped there with those 3 ratings. And I'd get up in the plane and I would just love the experience of buzzing around, go out over the coast off Bodega, get over the clouds and fly around the tops of the clouds and played a game called Empire Strikes Back where you go around the spires and over the humps and down into the valleys, and if you touched a cloud, you were dead. So that was the game I played flying, and it was just developing my ability as a pilot and the finesse of control of the plane, and just a kick, and safe to do. So when my wife at the time would go in the plane with me, after the second time, she said, "You're different when you're in the plane." I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, normally you're out here, you're carefree, joking, sarcastic, always messing around, don't seem to take much seriously. But when you're in that plane, you are lasered on, serious about what you're doing. It's obvious that you're paying attention to every little detail around you. And I said, well, of course. Of course I was. And then she gave me a poster. And this is what that poster was. There is a tree, and a biplane is laying in the tree because it has crashed into the tree. And the quotation, aviation in itself is not inherently dangerous. In fact, it's safer than driving a car. But to an even greater degree than the sea, it is terribly unforgiving of any carelessness, incapacity, or neglect. And I knew that intuitively in the flying process itself. Just in the experience of flying, I knew that. You can die if you don't pay attention. You can die if you do something stupid. If you neglect what needs to be done, you can die. And you get to experience the fall before you do. See, flying is easy. Navigation and landing, that's where the game is. Because if you can't land, bummer. And if you can't navigate, if you can't figure out where you are and where you want to get, then you can't figure out how to get there. So what a great metaphor, and came in perfect alignment when I discovered metaphysics. It was just like aviation. Absolutely like aviation, which means implicitly I understood that with regard to outer freedom, there are things we have to do, and it may take some time to accomplish them. So in 1776, the Declaration of Independence was signed. It was not until 1783, 7 years later, that the war was over and independence could actually be claimed. Until we had finished the war with Britain, all we had was a declaration that we were independent, that we were free. And in metaphysics, it's no different. We can declare something, and it may take some time to experience it. Does this track? Does this make sense to you? Now, occasionally, there's a very short period of time. We call those miracles. But there's a very short period of time from the declaration to the experience of the freedom itself. There's a short time from the declaration of the desire to the experience of the manifestation. And sometimes it's a longer time. 7 years for a group of people to actually become free from subjugation. 7 years is not that long. Some wars have gone on a whole lot longer. And nobody ended up free afterwards. So, that's one example. Aviation is another example. It requires responsibility and it requires work here in the physical world. Tiananmen Square is another great example. 1989, there was this guy who was affectionately called Tank Man. And here he is with his grocery bags in hand, standing in front of the tanks that were coming in to occupy Tiananmen Square because of this revolution. And he stood there. And for some reason, the tank did not run over him. The regime at the time was more than willing to shoot all sorts of people, but for some reason it wasn't okay to run over somebody with a tank. And so the tank stopped. And then it came a little bit further to try to intimidate the guy out of the way. And he stood there. The tank started going around him. And he did not budge backwards. He went sideways and stood in front of the tank. Tank went the other direction. He walked over here and he stood in front of the tank. He would not yield even an inch. And then he goes further. He climbed up on that tank and he banged on the tank lid and said, "Get out of here. We don't want you here." One guy stood up and said, "Done. No more." That's a powerful statement. And the rest of the people around, they may have cheered. I wasn't there. They may have cheered. Who knows what actually happened? And at the same time, this guy took a stand in the outer realm, in the outer world. I can only imagine the sense of terror he felt and the anger that he felt on top of that made the terror irrelevant. So he said, "I'm done." Now bring that home to yourself. Have you ever gotten to that place where you said, "I'm done"? You may not have needed to be angry, but you had this absolute clarity, "I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not putting up with this anymore. I'm taking a stand," and it might have been with another person, it might have been a work environment or whatever, but there was some point in time where you decided to claim that life called your life and start living that life. That's really what freedom is all about. Inner freedom. Ernest Holmes, in his definition of freedom, I love how complicated he can make things. Freedom, the necessary prerogative of self-choice acting as a law of cause and effect, carrying with it the liabilities of its selectivity. What? All he's saying, let's chunk it down to common vernacular here. All he's saying is there is this basic natural truth that you live in choice, period, all the time, never don't. And every choice has with it a subsequent consequence. Choice, consequence, choice, consequence, choice, consequence. Never can't be otherwise. A choice and a consequence. An intention, an outcome. A decision, an experience. It's all the same thing. We make a choice and the law says, okay, cool. It presumes we know what the hell we're doing. And sometimes we find out that's not what we really wanted. Let me be a little more precise. Let me change that a little bit. And imagine the times, think about the times, recall the times when you were absolutely certain about something and found out after you started experiencing, maybe not. That's what I want you to pay attention to, because the consequence is natural from the choice. And we can talk about freedom from the backward approach too. We can back into the cause of that freedom. The freedom that we experience here in the United States, in its varied forms, started with a group of people saying, I don't want somebody telling me what to do. I mean, it's simply, I don't want somebody telling me what to do. How many regimes, how many countries, how many scenarios still exist where one or two or a very small group of people tells everybody else what to do? And that they will support and uplift and care for and take care of, etc., and provide the luxury and etc. for those people, that one person or those few people, where the many support the one. Until those things called revolutions occur, and then they just trade in one dictator for another. So that's the point of today. Have you just traded in one dictator for another? Instead of being subject to one particular point of view or a choice, you now are subject to a different point of view or choice? The consequence of a choice. Oh my God, I remember the first time I realized that the idea, you made that bed and you're gonna lie in it. The first time I heard that in my head going, nonsense. automatically I was uplifted out of the subjugation to that principle. Outer freedom takes a while to manifest. Inner freedom literally can be that quick. The simple recognition that we have a choice, the prerogative of self-choice. Do you always know that you're a choice? Go like this. I mean, we can understand the truth of it, but we don't always really know that. Really deep within us. I know this thing works. There we go. The necessary prerogative of self-choice. Joan Borysenko. Inner freedom manifests itself when we no longer march to the beat of any drum, but to that which calls from within the still sacred voice of our own higher self. Inner experience. In a different place in The Science of Mind, Holmes talked about freedom as an inner experience. Every person inherently possesses the potential ability to free themselves from the bondage of fear, anxiety, and limitation. If we talk about discord, we shall become more discordant. Choice, consequence. People who spend all their time talking about their unhappiness become more unhappy. Choice, consequence. Eventually, we shall understand that all human bondage is an invention of ignorance. Ignorance. Not knowing. Not knowing what? One, we're always at choice. Two, consequence follows choice. That simple. How easy is it to focus on and choose the desire of our heart? Are you going to depend upon your history, the past, decisions you've made, instead of literally stepping into a completely new life? Simply by choosing it, and you know you chose it because you choose to behave that way. So since we're never not at choice, and stuff happens, yesterday we were going through some errands, getting some stuff done. And it seemed like there was an obstacle in front of every single thing we were trying to do. Literally. This was a thwarting, this was a stalemate, this was a break, this was a distraction, etc., etc. Again and again. I mean, it seemed interminable. And finally, inside me, I said, no more. And sat down and did some things that I knew I needed to do, period, regardless of anything else. I just did what I needed to do and stayed focused on that. Now, people, it's not the events, it's not the focus that I used, it's the process I'm talking about here. I stopped. I backed up and looked at what was going on. And I started attending to something I knew I needed to do and wasn't doing. In that simple process, the frustration that I was experiencing up to that point in time. See, every single moment in our minds, in our thoughts, we're a choice. We don't have to choose to go down that track of frustration. We don't have to choose to think that we don't have power. We don't have to choose to think that we can't figure it out. We feel most free when we have an event happen in our life, and it doesn't have to be exactly like we want it to, and we keep our attention focused on our desire, which is peace of mind or ease, harmony, well-being, a recognition that I do have a mind and I know how to use it, recognition that there's power inside of me and I can tap into and bring that out and get something done. That's true for every single person. And sometimes, gosh, I find it frustrating. I mean, freedom is the sweetest, the most amazing experience to have. And so many people choose to have their freedom look a whole lot like suffering and victimhood. Because that's a proof of freedom too. Ernest Holmes said that he believed that the world had learned enough through suffering. I'd love to believe that. But my observation is otherwise. Do I believe that there is less suffering today than there was 100 years ago? I think there is. And maybe it feels like there's more because we're more attuned to what suffering really is. We're more attuned to the experience of it instead of, well, that's just the way life is. Instead of holding it as, oh, it's just part of life. It's something we don't have to put up with anymore. So I believe that there probably is less suffering today than there was 100 years ago, even as I believe that there is more compassion today than there was 100 years ago. More recognition of our individual choices today than there was 100 years ago. That we're moved into an era where individuality and tribe both are equally important. Tribe meaning we can't really get much done alone, and individuality because the individual in tribe is a thriving oriented system. So your creativity, my creativity, his creativity, her creativity, their creativity is what makes thriving possible. Freedom is a state of complete well-being resulting from the level of our understanding of the principle of freedom, which is choice. If you don't think you have choice, you will not feel free. If you think you have no alternatives, you probably are going to feel thwarted, probably are going to feel enslaved, if you will, especially if that only one choice is an undesirable experience. In truth, we're already free. That's a fact. That's a truth. And there's a price to pay to feel that freedom. I don't want to pay. Too bad. We will pay for our freedom. But the cost of that freedom is nothing more than learning to control our thinking. And that's it. We could be a hobo and still have our microwave oven. We would just probably give up the hobo life and go back and enjoy our microwave, and then go back and enjoy the hobo life, or whatever. We live in choice, people. We're not stuck only being able to do it one way. So, I invite you today to consider in what way you do not feel free. And second to that recognition, that observation, in what way could you be free even there? When you start noticing that you have an alternative, even though it may not seem like it, that right there will lighten the burden of enslavement. Instantaneous change. You don't have to wait for 7 years until the war is over. There needn't even be a war, but rather a simple recognition that I live in choice, and the consequences of my choice will bring my next experience. So I choose peace. Repeat after me. I choose peace. I choose joy. I choose abundance. I choose wholeness. I choose love. Bless you. Let's together pray. And stepping back for a moment, together let's go upstairs to that place where peace originates, where power originates, where intelligence and joy and abundance originates. That upstairs place found within. For I know right there in the center of all life, that which I call God exists, lives, moves, and has being. And I know that it lives right there within me. It lives within everyone. So these words spoken today have the power of that knowing behind them. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was life. And I choose now to know that life within me and within all people. And it manifests simply in the claiming. So as each of these words of prayer continue, I speak my word for this beloved community, while recognizing that spirit of life within each person. I know that that mind of each person now chooses life in full vitality, a life filled with power and purpose and meaning. The intelligence within that person chooses clearly the joy-creating experience of the heart. So the joy fills me in this knowing. And the joy reaffirms itself in the experience that I would call gratitude. The small forms, since I know it as already done, I can easily, readily let it be and step into the flow of this new choice. So knowing this as already done, together we affirm it by saying together, and so it is.